I've been playing video games since I was a kid, and I've tried to keep up with the industry ever since. But I never in a million years would have imagined that we could go where we go now, emotionally and psychologically, with video games. So far, my gaming journey has taken me behind the scenes to learn how modern game design schools are training the next generation of developers. Today, I'm shifting my focus to learn even more. I'm going to talk with a couple of very influential game journalists and one of the legends of the games industry.
Like most in my generation, I've played video games since I was a kid, and covering the gaming industry as an adult has been one of the great joys of my life. The industry has changed a lot over the years, and I've seen artistic and technical breakthroughs in games that I never would have thought possible. It's mind-blowing what game designers can bring to life on screen these days. With all the advancements in hardware and software lately, I wanted to find out where we are as an industry, go a bit deeper, and see if I could make some conclusions about where we're headed. So I called some industry friends and headed to E3 to explore. E3 is the annual video game industry-only convention in Los Angeles, where the latest and greatest games and game systems are announced each year. First up, Nintendo. Am I too tall?
I'm here at the USC Game Innovation Lab to learn about the science and psychology of modern games and how they're affecting our culture. I have 3 kids who have been playing games since they were old enough to pick up a smartphone, so I'm very curious about how games and technology, being so woven into our current generation's culture, will affect their decisions and their future lives. What do video games and violence truly do to our brain?
You have not found any direct correlation that it does increase the incidence of violence or bullying.
There really are a batch of studies, probably 100 to 150 studies on this. It's really, really difficult to say anything absolutely conclusive based upon this pool of studies.
The big fear, I think, when people started gaming a lot was, oh, that's going to take these kids and isolate these people. No, they're actually social with people around the world.
The goal in virtual reality is to represent the virtual cameras exactly as your eyes would be in the real world.
This is the first time I've understood.
As an actor in a game, when I get deeper into the character, it becomes more natural and more real. And it shows, and you believe it as you're playing the game.
Madison Square Garden sold out because of video games.
I wasn't even aware that this next job existed. This is Malik Forte, and he's a professional video game journalist for Nerdist, an influential pop culture network that covers the gaming industry.
I used to play in first-person shooter tournaments for the game Rainbow Six.
And that's where you got your confidence probably to talk about these kinds of things.
Yeah, that's where I got my career from. I started a YouTube channel, and I just started riffing about the stuff I was doing, and people from the Rainbow Six community watched, and then other people started watching, and then I just started doing it for everybody, and next thing I know, I'm here.
And it blows my mind that there's a career in video game journalism, video game enthusiasm.
In the 1970s, there was an explosion of television, newspaper, and magazine coverage, all focused on the new and novel video game medium. This led to the very first generation of video game print magazines in the late 70s. The video game crash of 1983 all but destroyed the market for game journalism in the US. But with the arrival of the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985, not only was the industry reborn, but a new wave of game publications and journalism began to emerge. Throughout the 1990s, novel attempts to bring game journalism into the digital age were made, but few saw the future for what it was: online. Over the next decade or so, scores of websites offering game reviews, articles, and commentary came and went. But as games grew more sophisticated, so did the audience and the voices covering them. This created a growing market for more personal gaming coverage written from a unique point of view. By the mid-2000s, independent writers had their first real voice in video game journalism, which led us to this modern generation of streamers and YouTubers who provide colorful commentary and personality to almost every genre of game content.
What's up, everybody? I'm James Duggan with IGN Access here at the PlayStation Gear booth.
Andrea Renee here for GT News at the 2014 DICE Awards in Las Vegas. I'm Naomi Kyle here with IGN. Hey guys, Justine here, and I've got some big news.
Are you a critical enthusiast? Do you just wail on stuff if you don't like it?
No, I like to stay focused on the positive, you know? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion at the end of the day. As passionate as I am about gaming, I do realize they're a tool for us to have fun, you know? And so
then what do you want your impact to be?
I want people to be able to experience video games and take every piece of a video game into consideration.
Is there enough? Is there enough new stuff happening all the time? I mean, is it too much?
I don't want to say there's too much. I like that there's so much stuff going on, you know? It's a great thing.
Is the video game community publishing anything that, you know, Time, Newsweek, is there anywhere else that people...
Well, I mean, you see Game Informer, but honestly, video games, they don't need to have their own. Destiny was on the front cover of Time magazine. And to me, that's just kind of, you know, indicative of the fact that games can be anywhere.
When did video games become a thing that it's okay to talk about in public?
That's a good question. When did we hit that stride? I don't know. I would say probably like in the beginning of the PlayStation 2 era. You saw consoles started buying into the online gaming. I think that's when it started to really hit its stride mainstream-wise. And that's why the PlayStation 2 was the highest selling console of all time. You started seeing, like, you know, pop culture icons show up in video game ads, and Beyonce has a Nintendo 3DS. So all the little girls who listen to Beyonce are like, well, maybe video games are cool because Beyonce plays them, you know?
You can put a game console on a famous person, but if the game sucks, people aren't gonna wanna, like, the rubber meets the road when people are...
If the game sucks, yeah. But I think that's the thing. If you have a good product and, you know, your marketing campaign is good, you can be successful. Like Activision, for instance. Call of Duty, their marketing campaigns were amazing. You know, they would bring in, like, NBA stars and movie stars, and people would watch these commercials and be like, I gotta try this game. And then they try it, and it was actually a good game. It was a cultural phenomenon. You know, so.
There's so many of those in the video game world.
Indeed.
It's the second guitar solo that sorts the men from the boys. I was kind of counting on that.
Dark Howard. Dark Howard.
You hustled me.
I sell video games, and I'm proud to tell you it brings me as much happiness as it does for the people I provide them to.
This is Reggie Fils-Aimé, President and COO of Nintendo of America.
Today, he's in the final stages of preparation for the company's biggest showing of the year. Here at the E3 convention, video game critics and competitors from around the world will get their first look at what Nintendo has been working on for the past year. Reggie took me on a personal tour around the booth hours before the show opened, and we talked about all things Nintendo.
So here we are at E3.
So here we are at E3.
Yes.
You know, this is the booth that people get to experience, and every year the booth has to take on the magic of what we're showing. So it's quite the challenge.
And it's important to get your message out there to the fans.
Exactly, because in the end, it really is all about the fans.
Right. What would you tell someone who's never been to E3 what it is?
So E3 is the annual gathering of all of the key players within the industry. It's the opportunity to show off the latest games, latest technology.
So what is the message that Nintendo tries to get out there?
Our overarching message is always about the fun and enjoyment of our content. We are entertainment-based. That's our history all the way back from making playing cards.
The big three at E3, it's always Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. And you're right, Nintendo has such a different vibe and such a different look from Microsoft and Sony. Why do you think you're still always up there? Why do you think you're such a tough competitor?
Well, first, so much of the content we make is only available on our platform, right? You can't get it anywhere else. So that alone makes us a very challenging competitor because no one else can have Mario, no one else can have The Legend of Zelda. But secondly, we're always pushing the envelope from an innovation standpoint. The Wii Remote, for example, it was something that the industry didn't see coming.
Reggie has been with Nintendo for 12 years, but he was a gamer long before that. I was interested to hear more about his relationship to Nintendo as a fan and as a player.
Reggie, talk to me a bit about your personal gaming history.
My very first console was a Super Nintendo system. I played that constantly by myself with my kids. I finished Super Mario World with 99 lives.
Super Mario is a legend. Why do you think Nintendo was able to create a character like that?
Mr. Miyamoto, Mr. Tezuka, created this character with a mustache so that you could separate his nose from the rest of the face. A character that was given overalls so that you could tell the difference between his arms and his legs. I mean, all of these little things that became iconic to who Mario is today. But again, at the heart was a focus on craftsmanship and a focus on making every subsequent Mario game unique and compelling.
You create new games all the time. What's the decision between using one of your iconic characters or going with something completely new?
We think about what's going to be fun new gameplay. And as we identify that gameplay, we then think about which IP does it fit best? Maybe it needs to be new IP. But it's this constant iteration of what's the gameplay innovation, and then how do we bring it to life?
It has to be ingrained in it somehow, and if it doesn't fit, you're not going to force it.
Exactly. Again, that's the Nintendo way of doing things.
Yeah.
It's not right for everybody, but certainly it's right for us.
I get the opportunity to sit down with game industry veteran David Perry, who's been developing games for over 20 years and is the founder of Gaikai, the groundbreaking cloud service purchased by PlayStation for a lot of money.
Do you think video games contribute to any social ills?
I think of video games, honestly, as just another form of entertainment. But in video games, there's one problem, which is anonymity, and I think that's one of the more challenging parts of the industry. Imagine,
what do you mean?
Well, imagine you're playing tennis with somebody, but they don't know who you are, and you can say anything you want, and they can't get to you. That's one of the fundamental things that I think gaming is suffering from a bit, is just people being able to say what they like without any sort of price to them whatsoever. And I think that's going to change. You're seeing much better social systems. Ultimately, the better the systems become for managing these griefers, I think ultimately things get better. But no, overall, I just think of games as entertainment.
How about things like brutal, horrific violence? Do you have any opinion on those things when you create a game?
I definitely believe that socially we have a responsibility, so I'm not a fan of doing ultra-violent games. The good news is that the industry is policed by their sales. And that's something just to feel a little bit confident on. Because it's like writing a book. I can write any book I want, but Barnes & Noble won't stock it, you know, if it gets too crazy. And that's what happens in the game industry, is if you made something that was really bad and people really shouldn't be seeing, there's no retailer is going to stock it. But you have to always remember that this is a global industry. This is not an American industry. Right. There's lots of other countries which are way more sensitive than the United States that censor very aggressively. And in those countries, you'll lose their sales. And that's not good either. So it kind of polices it to some extent by itself.
So the sweet spot is basically appealing to human common sense rationality.
Yeah, it sort of takes care of itself, but I will say it is really important that we continue to promote the rating system that exists. So we have a good rating system. All games are rated, but that's the parents' responsibility. And as you know, it's a bit like going to the movies. Some parents are a little more lax. You know, maybe they can see a PG, maybe they can see a PG-13. But anyway, if they're playing video games, my recommendation is they take the time, go online, and just look at what the ratings mean.
According to the Oxford Internet Institute, the biggest expression of aggressive tendencies related to video games came not from the violent content itself, but from the player's inability to access a game they're craving or frustrations with game controls and gameplay.
I'm Michelle Mora, and you're watching Chicks with Joysticks!
This is Michelle Morrow. People say a lot about how video games influence society. I could never have imagined the impact that video games can have on someone's life until I heard her story. All right, so I'm here with Michelle Morrow. To you, when you play your game, say what your game is.
World of Warcraft is my game of choice. I had a very bad accident back in 2007.
So this was part of your recuperation?
Yes, absolutely. So I broke my neck.
Wow.
And during that time, I couldn't do anything. So I started playing games. And my boyfriend came home one day with a copy of World of Warcraft, an MMORPG, like a big game. So there's millions and millions of people online playing.
Next time you're online playing World of Warcraft, don't even think about chatting with me.
That's how you two met online?
Yeah, it's a cool game. World of Warcraft, or WoW as players call it, is an MMORPG, which stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. It consists of a large number of players interacting with each other in an online world. Where MMORPGs differ from other online games is typically by the number of players able to interact together, and by the game's open and persistent world, which is hosted and maintained by the game's publisher. This persistent online world continues to exist and evolve even while players are offline and away from the game. These types of games are played all around the world, have millions of subscribers, and generate billions of dollars each year.
For me, I was looking at the different avatars in World of Warcraft, and it got to the Blood Elves. The Blood Elves are a part of the Horde faction. In Warcraft,
Everybody knows that the Blood Elves are part of the Horde faction. You do not have to explain it to this television audience.
These were people who had been through a lot of tragedy. And so because those ideas were so close to what I was going through.
Clearly somebody was expressing themselves through this story, and you're reading the story, and you're actually developing an emotional connection to those ideas.
Absolutely. This character in particular had lost her body. And that's how I felt. I had felt at that time. I was in a neck brace, I was on the couch, I couldn't move. And here was this character who just desperately had fought so hard to find her body and to get it back. And that story resonated with me so much and really helped in my healing process.
You developed a relationship with this character and her story and this world, and it spoke to you because of your personal, very dramatic, very recent experience.
Yeah, through all of this, I ended up getting better. I had been interviewed a few times and people would ask me about World of Warcraft. After a while, they asked me to host BlizzCon, which is their huge event.
I want to back up for a second. I have a question for you. Have you met any of the people who created that?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was very emotional for me at first, because it had an impact on me. I met these people and I thought it was incredible. When I started talking about my story, other people started telling me about their stories, and they were reaching out to me saying, thank you for talking about this. And then I found out this whole group of people play games as therapy.
When you watch somebody playing a video game, you go to a friend's house and that friend is got the headset on and he's playing some, Call of Duty or something like that.
I like how he's like this.
Yeah, or sorry, I like this or whatever, I don't know. It looks like they're cut off from community.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there's a community inside the box somewhere or inside those servers somewhere, but it doesn't look like, to the outside person.
A lot of these people go on to form friendships and relationships. In my guild alone, in World of Warcraft, we've had 2 marriages in the guild. People have met each other
That means babies are coming.
There have already been babies.
So you would say to a skeptic or a news person who is talking just about the violence, how would you say what you just said to them?
I would say that gaming is healing, and it is proven, and we've seen it, and it helps kids, it helps adults, helps people of all ages be able to either escape from their disease, work on manual dexterity, hand-eye coordination, just keeping yourself cognitively alert.
Michelle, thank you so much. That was awesome. I learned so much. Connected gamer communities is a cultural phenomenon that is becoming more and more mainstream as the internet becomes a bigger and bigger part of life. Consider this. Out of a global population of just over 7 billion people, almost half, or about 2.5 billion people, use the internet regularly, with many of the most active users being gamers.
Don James is Executive Vice President of Operations at Nintendo of America. He's been with the company for over 35 years and was intimately involved in the launch of the original Nintendo Entertainment System in North America. So I was thrilled to get a chance to chat with him.
What gamer doesn't remember their first gaming being with Super Mario?
I certainly remember it because I was in New York introducing that game.
Really?
Yeah, back in 1985.
You've been there since the beginning.
I've been there since day one.
Oh my gosh. So what does it mean to you to be seeing the 30th anniversary here at E3 right now?
Kind of shows for me the power of that particular franchise. Just never seems to go away.
Right. So let's go back to the beginning, when Nintendo first started.
Yeah.
You guys originally started as board games and card games.
Actually, the first product was Hanafuda Cards.
Yeah.
That was like 120 years ago.
So long ago.
Yeah.
Nintendo is a global company now, but they started out by making Hanafuda, or playing cards, back in the late 1880s. By the 1950s, they got lucky enough to score a deal with Disney to make Disney-themed cards, which were very popular. From the 1950s to the 1970s, Nintendo had success after success, but nothing could compare to the triumph that came with arcade hits like Donkey Kong and Radar Scope. Building off their achievement in the arcades, in 1983, Nintendo conquered the home market too, launching their all-new Famicom system in Japan, a name combining the word family and computer, becoming an instant hit. However, Nintendo's scheduled US release of Famicom came into jeopardy with the video game crash of 1982. So, to convince retailers to carry their new video game system, Nintendo redesigned Famicom to look more like a VCR and included a light zapper gun, 2 game controllers, and was rebranded the Nintendo Entertainment System, avoiding the words video or game to get onto store shelves. It was a massive success. The NES brought about a renaissance in games that continues to this day.
Nintendo was at the forefront of the console wars. What do you think birthed the console wars, and what do you think fueled it?
We were the only console on the market at the time, and Sega, I think, saw that as an opportunity and created their own console and came into the marketplace, and then that created, this company versus company rivalry. And people were actually making shirts, death to Sega, or we're gonna kill Nintendo, and that's really what spawned the console wars.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember growing up in my school, you were either a Nintendo family or a Sega family.
Yeah.
You were not both.
Yeah.
I was a Nintendo girl.
It even went so far as to have the TV advertising competing against each other.
Oh, yes.
Not just the sales, but actually the advertising was doing it too.
Check this out, brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
What's this one?
Oh, this is a Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis.
Nintendo, now you're playing with power. Sonic the Hedgehog, now included when you buy a Genesis system.
Don is a true industry veteran. He's been in the game industry for almost 40 years. Not only did he help launch some of Nintendo's most iconic franchises and systems, he was part of the original group that started the very first E3 convention and helped found the ESRB rating system for games.
What do you think the biggest challenge Nintendo has had to deal with?
Competition is fierce in the gaming industry. Ever since Sega came into it, the competition has been fierce. Then Sony came into it, it was fierce. The competition is always probably our largest challenge, but we sort of have a secret weapon, and that's our franchise characters, which really nobody else has.
Nintendo's lineup of iconic characters and their influence in video games and pop culture cannot be overstated. Many game historians attribute these early Nintendo mascots with the importance players and game critics now put on well-developed game characters. After Donkey Kong and Mario set the stage, the list of historic Nintendo characters seemed to grow by leaps and bounds, spawning new franchises and entirely new game genres. From Link to Samus to Wario, it's clear that crafting inventive stories, emotions, and history for their characters is at the heart of what makes Nintendo's roster so memorable, and a touchstone many modern game developers draw from to ensure they're developing what players have come to expect.
Hey ladies, guess what? I'm gonna play Legend of Zelda. What do you think? This is the dream I had every night in high school.
Dr. Emil Kokoro is a psychiatry professor and neurologist at the University of Chicago. I got the chance to visit with him and learn what really happens to the brain on games.
What parts of the brain are active during either witnessing virtual violence or real violence?
Well, we're not entirely certain about that, but the two areas of the brain that are involved in aggression is the frontal part of the brain, which is inhibitory, and the lower centers of the brain, which are excitatory. So when stimuli come in that are threatening, the lower part of the brain, which is the amygdala, will fire, basically saying, hey, there's something out there that's a threat. The frontal part of the brain has to evaluate that threat. Is it a real threat? Is it something you need to worry about? And if it isn't, then it shuts down the amygdala. The problem with people who are aggressive is the amygdala will fire more than it should, given a threat, and the frontal part of the brain will not inhibit as well.
Oh, interesting.
I think when you're in the middle of these games, you're really in the middle of a real experience.
Yeah.
In fact, in medicine and psychiatry, people are starting to use virtual reality to actually carry out some treatments. So for example, if someone's had a traumatic event, I mean, one thing that people do is to try to desensitize to that. Well, you can't have somebody getting beaten up all the time.
Right.
So you put them in a virtual reality where they get to experience that. So they're not going to get hurt physically, but they get the stimulus.
Even though they know it's a virtual world, their body is still...
Yes.
Those hormones are getting activated, those brain centers are getting activated as if it's real.
Right. So there was a study done a while ago where they took these healthy people and they said, we want you to imagine 4 scenarios. One is you get in the elevator with your mother, you go to the 10th floor, you get off the elevator. The second one is you get in the elevator with your mother, 2 other guys walk in. Third scenario is get in the elevator with your mother, these 2 guys walk in, one guy starts harassing your mother, when the one guy's holding you back. And in the fourth scenario is the 2 guys get in the elevator with your mother and you beat the crap out of them. So that's called unrestrained aggression. And when they compared that against, you're just getting on the elevator and nothing happens, the areas of the brain that are involved in aggression actually light up. And that's just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. It's not even virtual reality.
What is the arbiter of real threat and virtual threat? Like what part of the brain, why don't we act on it if I got done slaying dragons and it was
virtual? It would be the frontal part of the brain that would recognize, hey, this isn't real. That part of the brain really starts to activate. It starts to sort things out. That's what's happening when your brain is saying, is it real, is it not real, is it something we need to worry about, is it not something that we need to worry about?
Do you have concerns about video games in terms of violence?
My bet, not having done the studies, but knowing the literature in general, is that people who tend to be aggressive will probably be the ones who seek out those violent video games because they get something from it. People think that drinking is a bad thing for violence. Well, it is in general, but not everybody who drinks gets aggressive. Many people are these happy drunks, and it turns out in the studies, it's only the ones that are aggressive to begin with that actually get more aggressive when they drink in a controlled setting. So I bet it's the same thing with video games.
Predisposed to violence.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe, and I think the data will show down the road, if it doesn't already, that the people who are violent are the ones that are drawn to the violent video games.
Could video games activate an epigene for aggression?
I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know.
That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
Many academics from around the world acknowledge that repeated exposure to simulated violence may have short-term effects, but deny that concrete evidence exists linking violent video games to violent behavior. In fact, youth violence around the world is at a 40-year low, in direct conflict with the rise of more violent video game media.
I had a concept for a game that rewarded you for moral behavior. It was a shoot 'em up, but if you didn't shoot the guy unnecessarily, you received points. So you had moral judgments to make, which resulted in you winning the prize.
For many video game historians and pure gamers alike, Nolan Bushnell is the father of the video game industry, and his earliest creations are still influencing culture today. So it seems only appropriate to journey back to the original game pioneer to see if we can connect the dots between what games once were and what they're becoming. Is there not a moment now or in the last 20 or 30 years where you found yourself kind of lost in a game?
Oh, I do that all the time. I mean, there have been some magnum opus games that I didn't create that I just said, oh man, this is so good.
Mario Brothers. Tetris.
Doom. You know, they were such leaps with the technology at the time. Actually, I thought the Wii was a fantastic platform. Today's video games are an articulation of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So, but instead of crawling through the wardrobe, you're essentially going into the screen of your computer.
So story, emotions, communicating emotions. Can you think in Atari, like, do we feel that? Do you feel the initial steps of that?
The problem we had in those early days is the technology was so hard that the most you could do is deal with, that's evil, you're good, vanquish evil.
That's all right. Kill the asteroids or whatever.
Done. You know,
Yeah.
those evil guys, they deserve to die, gone.
So you had within the Atari family this idea that you're not going to hurt human beings.
There was a lot of controversy about video games. You know, people didn't want their kids spending 24/7 playing games, and so there was a lot of pushback anyway. And so that's the reason I said, let's just not deal with that as an added problem. Subsequently, I mean, I love Doom. You know, it's clearly a fantasy construct. You know, you're killing zombie, alien, nightmare people, which should be dead.
Well, some of them have families, I suppose.
No, it's very clear they don't have
They don't have families, yeah.
No, they were born in the bowels of a machine. But I do have a problem with Grand Theft Auto. Would I ban it? Of course not. But would I alert parents to say, you know, there are better things you can do?
What's your sense of the health of the industry?
The health of the industry could not be better. The cost of the equipment is so much lower. And so the more times you can enable creative people to articulate their vision, the better off you are. If you're passionate and you can pull passionate people into your vision, things happen. The figure of merit is who's creative. And that's the right place for it to be.
People meet and become friends, and some get married. Did you see the beginnings of what it would become back in the day?
Yeah. I saw games as a very good forum for meeting people, because when you're in a bar and you walk up to some girl and you say, can I buy you a drink? It's clearly you're looking for a connection. If you say, let's play Pong together, it's a much softer relationship. In the early days of Pong, it was heavily driven by the fact that it was only a two-player game. And so it became acceptable to ask anybody at the bar to come and play Pong with you.
So basically, you're the video game equivalent of Barry White.
Yeah. Well, or Pong is the equivalent to Tinder.
Yeah, oh, jeez. When you think of early video game community, you're thinking about actually being in a common space with people, where now the game community is, there's unlimited amount of people. You might know what their real identity is, or likely you don't. In 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what's the community going to look like?
Well, I think that we will have an increasing amount of virtual reality and augmented reality. And augmented reality will take the form of being able to sit around a table and play Settlers of Catan, and the people across the table from you can be anywhere, and you can see them.
FaceTime meets chess from Star Wars with a Wookiee.
And you will be able to see the background behind them so that you don't get motion sickness.
Interesting. Well, you've given us a lot to chew on. You've given me a lot to chew on. And so it's good to meet you.
Thank you.
It's nice to know that you're an actual human being, not just Obi-Wan, not just Oz. Seeing the connection between the first generation of games and the innovators who made it possible, and the next generation of artists and innovators learning and pushing the medium forward, has been truly enlightening and inspiring. I can't wait to see what this amazing medium and community has in store for the future, and how we'll all, no doubt, be amazed by it once again.
This is Shigeru Miyamoto, creator of legendary franchises and characters like Mario, Donkey Kong, and so many more. While industry veterans like Nolan Bushnell, Ralph Baer, and Steve Russell undoubtedly gave birth to the first generation of games, many point to Mr. Miyamoto as the father of modern video games, creating a whole new generation of games and gamers.
Do you look at the hardware and create a game for that hardware, or do you think up a game and then try to imagine the hardware that could make that game come to life?
難しいんですよ。それは両方なんですね。
It's actually a difficult question, and it's really a little bit of both. It's not like I create some gameplay and say, hey, go make me some hardware to make this work. And it's not like I see the hardware and say, oh, well, what can I use that for? It's more like I sort of build these ideas in my head, and I'm sort of waiting for the chance. With a background as an industrial designer, I have that mindset. I have all these different ideas that I have in my head, and I'm watching the hardware and thinking to myself, when would be the best opportunity for me to bring this to life?
Let me show the first sketch I drew for Donkey Kong. The gorilla escapes from the cage, snatches the girl, and runs away with her. The man chases him, dodging all these barrels with a hammer in his hand. At the end, a hole appears in the ground, and the gorilla falls down, and he dies.
We're here at the 30th anniversary of Super Mario. What does it mean to you to watch this character grow over all this time?
ちょうどね、スーパーマリオができた頃。
Mario started, let's say he's 3 or 4 years old, and at some point early on in that career, people were, according to polls, were, he's more popular than Mickey Mouse. And of course, at that point, I was like, look, Mickey Mouse is, got 30 years on him, and, let's wait and see. But, maybe 30 years down the road when Mario turns 30, then I'm really happy to see where he is in relation to, say, an icon like Mickey Mouse. I think that over the course of this 30 years, I look at it now and I say, hey, maybe Mario is kind of up there with Mickey Mouse at this point in his career. And so I'm just very happy to see that we've come this far.
I absolutely believe that Mario and Mickey Mouse are right at the same level.
Thank you very much.
What is the source of inspiration for when you create games?
やっぱりね、自分が面白いと思ってること。
If I have a controller and I have a TV screen and I'm looking at what the interaction is between me and the screen, if there's something that says to me, wow, this is interesting, that's sort of what I start with.
Has that changed at all since you first started to now?
やっぱりね、昔僕がアーケードゲームを作り始めた頃はこう。
Well, I think at the beginning, of course, I was working with, arcade games, and of course we had a stick and a couple buttons. And so that's what was my inspiration for creating, like, what can I do with this? But as the interface evolved and changed over the years, and we got rid of that stick and we got, different pads and more buttons, and then, of course, we have a gyro sensor and all of these different interfaces that we were able to incorporate in our hardware allowed me to sort of broaden that vision of what we could accomplish. So it has changed based on the advancement of the user interface that we have.
By taking the leap from a joystick to a multi-button controller and directional or D-pad, Nintendo introduced gamers to a whole new way to control characters, vehicles, and all manner of new game mechanics. Key additions and iterations were later released, but nothing fundamentally changed player controls more than 1996's Nintendo 64, with the development of the first analog joystick that worked in tandem with a pair of triggers and multiple gameplay buttons for full control of a 3D character in a 3D world. 2001's release of the GameCube would improve further on this control style. With realistic control of 3D worlds conquered, Nintendo looked to do what no one saw coming: simplify. 2006's Wii console swept the world, creating an entire new play style: motion gaming. In many ways, the evolution of Nintendo game controls has paved the way for modern video game controllers. What was the idea that prompted Nintendo to bring us motion gaming?
もともとは最初からこう体を動かして。
It's not like we set out, let's create a game that's based on motion controls. Really what happened is we saw that controllers were becoming more complex and more complicated. We saw the same with games, and we were seeing a drop in the number of people who were interested in coming into games because it was so complicated. So when we sat back and said to ourselves, how can we make this more accessible to a wider group of people? What sort of things can we do? And that's really where that conversation began.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
Yeah, well, just keep your Power Gloves off her, pal.
Mario.
Yep.
He's Italian. He speaks very broken English.
All right, then there's Samus. So then we have Zero Suit Samus, which is
Is there a birthday suit, Samus?
This is Dr. Chris Ferguson, psychology professor at Stetson University, and he's an expert in violence in media. So I want to talk to him about the age-old question of video games and violence and see what the real story is.
We still don't really have a lot of clear answers.
You're saying the verdict's out.
Yeah.
You're not saying definitively.
In the research that we've done at Stetson, we really haven't been able to find much evidence for there being a clear link between playing violent video games and aggressive behavior, either in the short term or behaviors like engaging in violent crime or bullying or dating violence.
Are there studies where they see the effect of video gaming on, say, something like psychosis or depression?
We've done one at Stetson where we looked at kids who had pre-existing mental health conditions related to depression or attention deficit disorder. And there was another study just recently published looking at young adults on the autism spectrum. And in both cases, it looked like there was no evidence that violent video games worsened these conditions or interacted with these conditions to make these individuals more prone to engaging in violent behavior or bullying or other types of aggressive activities. That was really kind of an idea that came out a lot after the Sandy Hook shooting, was this idea, well, maybe video games don't influence most kids, but perhaps there's an at-risk population of kids. And we just haven't been able to find much evidence that that is the case.
Is there evidence to support that video games increase violent thought patterns?
What you can sometimes see is if you do a study of cognitive association right after playing a violent video game or a violent television show, people are still kind of thinking about the content of what they just saw. But I think you would see that with almost anything, you know. So the question becomes is, does that sort of thought association matter much for the real world? And we don't really find much evidence that it does. It's just kind of normal to have those lingering thoughts after exposure to just about anything. And the example that I sometimes would use is, you know, if you took men who are heterosexual, for instance, and you had them watch the movie Brokeback Mountain, for instance, and then you gave them neo-associative tests for homosexual themes. I bet you would find evidence that they're still thinking about things related to the movie in terms of association with homosexual behavior. But does that mean that they're going to change their sexual orientation, because they saw the movie? And clearly that's preposterous to even suggest such a thing. But that's more or less what we're still thinking about when we talk about video games. Absolutely people are still thinking about the content of the game that they played, a few minutes after they're done playing. Does that mean that they're going to now yell at their spouse or bully another child? The evidence doesn't seem to support that there's any kind of association with actual behavior in the real world.
Since you don't see an insane number of crimes that they can even tangentially tie to video games, I think that proves out. I read about a study not 2 months ago where they talked about not only does video gaming improve your hand-eye coordination, but there's absolutely no parallel between violent behavior and game playing.
Scientists have investigated the effects of violent video games for more than 2 decades. In fact, it is one of the most studied and best established topics in the field. For example, a popular study conducted by the American Psychological Association confirms a link between playing violent video games and aggression. This same study reports insufficient research to positively link violent video games and actual criminal violence. So what's the takeaway? I think Kevin Smith put it best when he said,
"Oh, it's the violence of a video game that makes somebody go out and do something like Columbine." This is crazy. Maybe those kids didn't do it sooner because they were able to sit there and play games. When we were kids, they run the Dukes of Hazzard and A-Team on TV. When you watched them, you weren't like, "I'm gonna go get in a car and jump a ravine." When you watched the A-Team, you weren't like, "I'm gonna go off the grid and fight crimes with a private army." It doesn't make you aggressive when you're playing a game. It makes you aggressive within the game. You know who they gotta watch? Not people that play video games, but just psychotic people. And you can usually spot those cats, man. They're the ones not playing video games. They're the ones hurting squirrels. Talk to those kids before you talk to the guy who's just like, "I'm just playing Angry Birds." Hey, Charles. How you doing?
Hello.
Let me know, and everybody, we had this.
This is just a normal, you know how guys stand around and talk all the time.
Just like this in front of big screens, right?
In big screens.
Yeah, absolutely. I have all my games. All of my SNES games, all my N64 games.
And this is before you worked for
And it was all before I worked for the company.
Reggie, this has got to be your I've made it moment. You're officially a puppet. Who gets to be a puppet?
I know, isn't it so fun?
Sonic was like too much going on for me.
Really?
When I was, yeah, I
Was it
can't
just too
handle
fast?
it. too much going on. I'm a simpleton.
Oh.
Just I think I'm linear. I don't know. I think I'm analog. I think I'm linear. I don't know. But let's
exercise and do various things. And all
see. I pictured you as Oz, like walking in. I was going to meet, the great and powerful Oz, and now you're talking about like psychobiological engineering. I'm like, I'm going to jump into one of these games.
Like that. I got to be Mario.
Music, okay, yeah. Yeah.
Did it work?
It worked.
Great. Awesome.
Love it. You get some good stuff?
So good, yeah.
Nothing usable, but
okay,
still
good.
fun.
At least one of
still
those.
Still fun.
Great.
Good hang.